All right. Beyond the walls of time. The present is our only point of reference for the past and for the future, and our awareness of any happening must obviously occur somewhat after the actual event. What then are we to make of the time warp that allows some people to prophesy that which will happen in the future? Anomalies and coincidences are related phenomena in that they are both departures from the expected time frame. That some prophecies do come true, that anomalies of many kinds exist, and that coincidences abound. All this is without question. The as yet fathomless mystery is what force or forces are powerful enough to bring them into being. The Sibyl or prophetess of Delphi looks into the future. The prophecy or prophecies. Let me see. Get the lighting right. Right there looks good. Prophecy is shit. Prophecy is at once among the most mundane and the most exalted of human presumptions. By it, properly speaking, we signify a transcendence of time and space that delivers to our consciousness apocalyptic landscapes, the death of kings, new ages, final judgments, and the risen dead. We also prophesy when we make a date for lunch the day after next or a dentist appointment for the following week. In these cases, we construe the present state of affairs, our wish to see a friend, the nagging suspicion of trouble in a lower molar, and confidently predict, despite the uncertainties of life, that a luncheon will take place, that a molar will be probed. Between these two extremities, the grand apocalypse and the lunch date, lie such gradations of prophecy as premonitions, precognitions, and predictions. Premonitions are unfocused sensations that usually occur in a more or less normal waking state or as the residue of an unremembered dream. The feeling that the plane a friend is due to take will crash or that a letter from a long lost friend will be in the mailbox is a premonition. Precognitions, which normally occur in dreams or states of reverie, are visual and more precise than premonitions. They occur in what is felt at the time to be a normal waking state and are indistinguishable from ordinary events, though they later prove to be specters of an event in the future. In a rare form of precognitive phenomena, the Vardorgar, most commonly experienced in Norway, events are sometimes prefigured by sounds. Footsteps are heard some time before an arrival. A door is heard to open or close before anyone passes through. Prediction differs from premonition and precognition by virtue of its deliberateness and the two kinds of techniques it employs. One of these includes the use of various and numerous signs, the position of planets, lines on the palm of a hand, tea leaves in a cup, toss coins, birds in flight, and so on. The other involves the use of mind changing drugs, procedures, and rituals, the latter often being aimed at invoking the help of some supernatural being with the gift of prophecy. Prophecy, in the grand sense, on the other hand, is usually neither sought nor cultivated by the methods of prediction. It is usually thought of as being inspired by God or gods or other natural. No, dang. Gods or gods or other spiritual beings of an elevated kind, and its subject matter is accordingly of major significance to large numbers of people. These areas of the prophetic spectrum are actually no more distinct from each other than are the colors of a rainbow. The most mundane examples, in fact, are not normally thought of as prophecy at all, though they share with it its qualifying characteristics. They have the emotional character of premonition, the wish to see a friend, the fear of toothache, the visual and sign reading characteristics of precognition and prediction, clear images of menus or dentist drills, and the sense of certainty about what has not yet taken place, which is the mark of all kinds of prophecy. And like all prophecy, they only sometimes come true. Finally, if mundane prophecy does come true, if our appointments occur as planned, if the future unfolds as expected. It does so for reasons pertaining to memory, observation, determination, and luck. A concatenation of factors as mysterious as any investigator of the prophetic could wish to find. Because the element of time is the essential ingredient in the phenomena of prophecy, it seems logical to present the examples here in chronological order. Biblical prophecies fulfilled. Numerous references in the Old Testament of the Bible are taken by Christians as prophetic of Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Among the more striking are these. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrath, who are little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. Micah 5:2. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing for joy. The waters shall break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. Isaiah 35:4-6. The prophet Isaiah, who lived in the 8th century BC, is among the biblical figures gloriously portrayed by Michelangelo on the ceiling of the Vatican's Sistine Chapel. Rejoice greatly, O daughter, O Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Lo, your kings come to you, triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on an ass, on a colt, the foal of an ass. Zechariah 9:9. And I took my staff grace and I broke it, annulling the covenant which I had made with all the peoples. So it was annulled on that day, and the traffickers in the sheep who were watching me knew that it was the word of the Lord. Then I said to them, if it seems right to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. And they weighed out as my wages 30 shekels of silver. Then the Lord said to me, cast it into the treasury, the lordly price at which I was paid off by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and cast them into the treasury in the house of the Lord. Zechariah 11:10-13. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he was borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that made us whole, and with his stripes we are healed. Isaiah 53:3-5. Yea, dogs are round about me, a company of evildoers encircle me, they have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my remnant they cast lots. Psalm 22:16-18. These biblical verses are held by Christians to accurately predict key events in Christ's life: his birth at Bethlehem, his miraculous cures, his entry into Jerusalem on an ass, his betrayal for 30 pieces of silver, his arrest and beating, his crucifixion. These and other such verses are, of course, not universally accepted as prophecies of Christ as the Messiah. Jewish commentary, for example, the famous suffering servant passages of Isaiah, beginning in chapter 42, are sometimes interpreted as referring to Israel itself, on the basis, for instance, of Isaiah 49:3. That's so funny. Been reading the Bible for like 2 years, chapter by chapter. I'm in Isaiah. I just did 46, and this is 49. So it's kind of cool. There's these weird synchronicities sometimes, man. It's just, I can't get away from them. What is it? On the basis, for instance, of Isaiah 49:3. And he said to me, you are my servant, Israel, in whom I will be glorified. And at least one commentator, Julian Morgenstern, has demonstrated a connection between this theme and pre-Semitic harvest rituals that indicate the very ancient salvatory role of a despised and executed figure. Jews then disagree with the theological significance attached to these verses by Christians, while others disparage their worth as prophecies on the grounds that they were self-fulfilled, on the grounds, that is, that Christ and his disciples fulfilled them quite deliberately and engineered the events of the New Testament, or their account of them, to conform to a plan outlined in the Old Testament, while this view, assuming the factual veracity of the Gospels, may or may not detract from Christ's status. It does not have any logical bearing on the prophetic connection between Old and New Testament events. Yeah. Hey, what is that? I'm not going to get into reading all the... I'm going to pick and choose which parentheses. You guys can read that. A contest of oracles. Yeah. Oracles were an accepted part of political and personal life in the ancient world, and the most famous of them remained influential for many hundreds of years. Valuable gifts were bestowed on them by hopeful or grateful inquirers, and many of the shrines housed great wealth. Each oracle had its own method of divination. The oracle of Dodona, for example, the oldest in Greece, was an oak tree whose oracles were interpreted by a priest from the rustling of its leaves, the cooing of doves in its branches, and the clanking of the brass vessels hung from it. The reputation and success of the oracles were as variable as their methods, and a troubled inquirer with no previous loyalties involved might well be uncertain as to where to turn for help. This was the position in which Croesus, the inordinately rich king of Lydia in the mid-6th century BC, found himself when the strength and ambition of his Persian neighbors grew to alarming proportions under the rule of Cyrus the Great. What danger did Cyrus pose to Lydia, and with whom might the king of Lydia most profitably ally himself to forestall the threat? These were important questions facing Croesus, and he felt the need of oracular help. But which oracle could he rely on? There were 6 famous ones in Greece and 1 in Egypt, and each had its enthusiastic devotees. Croesus therefore decided to approach the problem scientifically by testing the oracles before committing himself. 7 messengers, 1 to each shrine, were dispatched from Lydia on the same day and told to pose their question exactly 100 days from the departure date. The question each was to ask was, "What is King Croesus, son of Elatus, now doing?" Each was then to return to Lydia with the answer with all speed. The record of only one reply has survived, that given by the oracle at Delphi, at the foot of the southern slope of Mount Parnassus. Here, in the temple of Apollo, the human source of the oracle, traditionally a woman named the Pythoness, sat on a golden tripod above a deep cleft in the rock, chewing leaves of the laurel sacred to Apollo and inhaling the fumes that rose round her from the cleft. Her mutterings, when presented with a question, were frenzied and incomprehensible, and were translated for the questioner, usually in verse, by the attendant priest. Croesus' messenger had scarcely set foot inside the shrine when the oracle spoke, without even waiting for his question. "I can count the sands and I can measure the ocean. I have ears for the silent, and know what the dumb man meaneth. Lo, on my sense there striketh the smell of a shell-covered tortoise, boiling now on a fire with the flesh of a lamb in a cauldron. Brass is the vessel below, and brass the cover above it." This reply was taken back to Croesus, and he unhesitatingly placed his trust in the oracle of Delphi. For after much consideration, he had chosen to perform on the day of the test the most improbable act he could think of, and so he had taken a lamb and a tortoise, cut them into pieces, and set them to boil together in a brass cauldron with a brass lid. Let's see. The oracle of Delphi, a priestess traditionally known as the Pythoness, exercised her magical powers, having put herself under a spell by inhaling fumes and chewing laurel leaves. Well, isn't that nice? Synchronicity. The vexing things. Wait. I'll always have allergies. So that's just the way it goes. Some days they're good, some days they're not. They're pretty good right now, though. So I'm not snorting like I did yesterday. Where was I? Synchronicity. The vexing thing about techniques of predictions that rely on signs of whatever kind is that no connections seem to exist between the signs and what they signify. In the disposition of planets or the condition of the sheep's liver, in the way birds fly or tea leaves settle in the cup, in none of these traditional modes of prediction is there a conceivable relationship with war or death, with fortune and love or money, or with the outcome of any other future event. Such devices, however, are still considered to be useful omens. Professor C.G. Jung, the Swiss psychotherapist and co-founder with Sigmund Freud of 20th century psychiatry, was persuaded that such methods of prediction do produce meaningful results. His work had brought him into repeated contact with the stranger shores of the human psyche, and he was aware that the lives of many people are punctuated by the phenomena of coincidences and fulfilled prophecies. Jung became convinced that some linking process distinct from causality but complementary to it is at work in the universe, and that its manifestation in seeming collaboration between the human psyche and the external world. He named this principle synchronicity, and spent much of the latter part of his life trying to explain his workings. In doing so, he was keenly aware of the difficulty of describing a non-causal process for an audience that has been deeply conditioned by an exclusively casual view of the world. His systematic essay on the subject, entitled Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, and published in 1952, was a heroic attempt to avoid giving the impression that the agents of synchronicity are causal agents. In Jung's view, the agents of synchronicity are to be found in what he called the archetypes of the human psyche. An archetype appears to the conscious mind as a special kind of symbol. It is not conceived by the conscious mind, but arises into it, fully potent, from what Jung called the collective unconsciousness, a repository of archetypes held in common by all mankind. Just as all humans have certain genetic features in common, so they share, Jung found, a wealth of psychological material that becomes conscious only in dreams and reveries. Examples of the archetypal figures that Jung found reoccurring in his own dream, in the dreams of patients, and in the folk stories and myths of every age and nation are those of the wise old man or woman, the eternal mother, the magical child, the trickster, the tree, and the mandala, a graphic pattern symbolizing the universe. Just as genes embody order, genes are orderly arrangements of DNA molecules and are themselves disposed in an orderly way in chromosomes and create orderly patterns of growth, so archetypes embody order at a psychological level, and in their presence, new order ensues. At this point, Jung's difficulty was to explain how the archetype, by virtue of its inherent order, creates order in a non-causal way. A medical example may provide an approximate model of the process. Penicillin is helpful in cases of bacterial infection because penicillin molecules are a partial match for molecules in the bacterial cell wall. When a bacterium is deceived by this near match into incorporating a penicillin molecule into its cell wall, the wall is weakened at that point because of the inact fit and ruptures, killing the bacterium. The penicillin molecule has been instrumental in this process, but not actively so. In the presence of the penicillin molecule, the bacterium has developed a new fatally flawed molecular pattern. Thus, the role of the penicillin is contingent but not causal. In a similar way, an archetype serves as a psychic catalyst in whose presence orderly, cyclical experiences unfold. What is that word? Psychical is what it is today. Experiences unfold, and in a way that often entails the physical world. How can this be possible? Another biological example may be helpful. It is established that some migratory birds are guided by the stars. The bird's genetic time, sense, and mental image of the star patterns can be considered as the psychic level. The stars themselves represent the physical level. When the two levels mesh to put the birds on their proper route at the proper time, we see evidence of the psychic catalyst or archetype. And here too, the archetypes, the genetic inner clock and mental image, are contingent, not causal. So, in a similar way, many human beings responding to the force of inherited psychological patterns find themselves in various altering relationships with the external world. Jung himself was well aware that his theory was tentative for Jung himself was well aware that his theory was a tentative first step to the understanding of something profoundly difficult to formulate. The most important question he left unanswered: the real and precise nature of the synchronistic connection between the psychic and the physical. For Jung, this relationship was the psychological equivalent of the physicist's mathematical equations, and he realized that the lack of an appropriate contribution from mathematical physics rendered his theory incomplete as an attempt to account for the relative or partial identity of psyche and physical continuum. While the theory of synchronicity has not been proved right, it has also not been proved wrong, and people may have genetic archetypal subconscious information that is related to their seeming ability to foretell the future. Well, a popple. Yeah, we'll do the popple forecast. Popple forecast. A well-known prophecy regarding the papal succession has often been erroneously attributed to Saint Malachi of Ireland. Is it Malachi? It doesn't look like Malachi. Saint Malachi of Ireland, who lived from 1095 to 1148 and was famous for his prophetic gifts. The prediction, actually a forgery first published in 1595, consists of a series of brief descriptions, 2- and 3-word phrases in Latin. Page 111. Phrases in Latin of 111 popes, the sequence from 1143 to the presumed end of the papacy. Some are opaque and others are strikingly accurate. Great. What is this, Latin? Figures. Montium Custos, guardian of the hills, Alexander the 7th, 655-67. I'm not going to do all that, had as his family crest 3 hills with a star above them. Rosa Umbri, the Rose of Umbria, served in Umbria before becoming pope. Umbria's emblem is a rose. Ursus Velux, swift bear, had it the image of a running bear on his family crest. Peregrinus Apostolicus, apostolic wanderer, spent the last years of his life as a fugitive from the political aftermath of the French Revolution. Dabalinus Etruria, from the baths of Etruria, held office in Etruria before his election. I can't see. I need another light over here. But it's all right. I'll figure it out. Hold on. Let me see if I do this. No. Let's see if I do this. No. Doesn't help. From the baths of Etruria, Gregory the 16th held office in Etruria before his election. Religio, I'm not going to read the Latin, okay? You can read the Latin part. I'll read the stuff in quotes. Religion laid waste. The pope to whom this applied in the sequence of the prophecy was Benedict XV, whose reign spanned World War I and the subsequent world influenza epidemic. The angelic shepherd, Pius XII, was a devoted student of St. Thomas Aquinas, traditionally known as the angelic doctor. Shepherd and navigator John the 23rd was the shepherd and navigator of the Second Vatican Council. Flower of flowers, Paul VI had the fleur de lis as his personal coat of arms. The prophecy described only 4 more popes after Paul VI. From the half moon, or of the middle moon, referred to by John Paul I, who was elected to the papacy on August 26, 1978, and died 33 days later. On September 28th, approximately in the middle of the lunar month marked by the full moons of September 16th and October 16th, the present Pope, John Paul, whatever, the second. No, well, that's cool because it was 82. Wow, that's cool. It was 82, so it's 1978 to whenever he died, which my ma would know, is signified by de labora solis, from the toil of the sun, the import of which, so far at least, is not clear. The 2 remaining popes are signified as the glory of the olive, and Peter of Rome. After, or perhaps during, the reign of the last pope, Rome will be destroyed, and the day of final judgment will arrive. Joe Fisher predictions. That's pretty cool. That's what they were talking about in 82. You do realize I'm going to fuck this up constantly. And if I don't continue reading, if I do one little check, like the papal forecast and not get into Plowboy Prophet, then I have to do it next time. And if I cut it up that much, this book will take eons. So I have to continue on. I've only been going 26 minutes. If I stop at 26 minutes and I only got a page, that's a lot of minutes. But whatever. So do I want to do the Plowboy Prophet? Yes, because the beginning, yes. We're going to do Plowboy Prophet and I'm done. Robert Nixon, a rural visionary who, by reputation, was held to be mentally retarded, was born around 1467 on a farm in the country of Cheshire, England. He began his working life as a plowboy, being too stupid by all appearances to do anything else. He was mostly a silent youth, though sometimes given to strange, incomprehensible babblings that were taken to be a sign of his limited mentality. One day, however, while he was plowing a field, he paused in his work, looked around him in a strange way, and exclaimed, "Now, Dick, now, Harry. Oh, ill done, Dick. Oh, well done, Harry. Harry has gained the day." This outcry, more cognate than most, though still incomprehensible, puzzled Robert's fellow workers, but the next day, everything was made clear. At the very moment of Robert's strange seizure, King Richard III had been killed at Bosworth Field, and the vicar of that decisive battle, Henry Tudor, was now proclaimed Henry VII of England. Before long, news of the bucolic seer reached the new king, who was much intrigued and wanted to meet him. An envoy was sent from London to escort Nixon back to the palace. Even before the envoy left the court, Robert knew he was coming and was thrown into a fit of great distress, running about the town of Over and crying out that Henry had sent for him and he would be clammed, starved to death. In the meantime, Henry had decided on a method of testing the young prophet, and when Nixon was shown into his presence, the king appeared to be greatly troubled. He had lost a valuable diamond, he explained. Could Nixon help him locate it? Nixon calmly replied in the words of a proverb that those who hide can find. Henry had, of course, hidden the diamond and was so impressed by the plowboy's answer that he ordered a record to be made of everything the lad said. What he said, duly interpreted, forecast the English civil wars, the death of and abdication of kings, and war with France. He also forecast that the town of Nantwich in Cheshire would be swept away by a flood, though this has not yet happened. But the prophecy that most concerned Nixon was the most improbable of all, that he would starve to death in the royal palace. To allay these fears, Henry ordered that Nixon should be given all the food he wanted, whenever he wanted it, an order that did not endure the strange young man to the royal kitchen, whose staff, in any case, envied his privileges. One day, however, the king left London, leaving Robert in the care of one of his officers. To protect his charge from the malice of the palace domestics, the officer thoroughly locked him safely in the king's own closet. The officer was then also called away from London on urgent business and forgot to leave the key or instructions for Robert's release. By the time he returned, Robert had starved to death. Yeah. When Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII after the defeat and death of Richard III at Bosworth Field, the event was seen from afar by a clairvoyant plowboy. Next will be the prophecies of Nostradamus. That's it for today.